welcome back to the DC Universe Classics Director's Commentary with me, Scott, ToyGuru Neitlich. I was the brand manager for the first 19 waves, and speaking of waves, today we're doing sort of not a wave. Well, it was a wave, but it wasn't quite DCU Classics proper, meaning it wasn't in the bright orange and yellow packaging that, permeated the line. This was kind of a one-off wave, but it was still more or less DCU Classics. What I'm talking about is the Public Enemies wave. It was a single wave of figures that Mattel released that was still in 6-inch scale and very deliberately, and I'll get into this, done to both reflect the DVD release that Warner Brothers Home Video is doing based on the comic book, but also to fit within the world of DCU Classics, which is why I'm going to cover it as part of this DCU Classics Director's Commentary series. Alright, so let's get into it. Why a Public Enemies series? Well, basically because our licensing partner really wanted to promote the video and suggested that doing a wave of figures would be a great way to kind of tie the video release into the toy aisle and do some great cross-promotions. And as, a great partner, we were excited to do this. So it really, generated from Warner Brothers, but we really, stepped up and said, yeah, let's jump into that. And a big reason was because Public Enemies, as a DVD release, was going to have a huge cast of characters in animated style. And much like the success with Justice League Unlimited, everyone around the table, Warner, DC, Mattel, was really excited about a potential, another kind of animated universe. But at the same time, we wanted to be very conscious of having these figures also fit within the DCU Classics world because they were also 6-inch. So while they were going to be in the kind of animated style, as a collector myself, and I think this is kind of one of those times that I get to wear my collector hat, I get it. As collectors, we fear change. We want everything to harmonize and work together. So I knew it was very important when designing these figures that it both appealed to the animated style of the fans of the animated series, but also worked for DCU Classics fans. And one thing we had going was that this was only going to be at Target. This was a Target customized program. And you can see more on customized programs in one of my other videos linked here. But the reason that had that going for us is because we knew it was going to have more of a limited release, and that if we did it in a style that was kind of halfway between the animated style and DCU Classic style, that it would be a way to hopefully please everybody. So, as I mentioned, Public Enemies, uniquely for the Warner Brothers Home Video release or Home DVD releases, had a huge amount of characters. A lot of times their home video releases, home DVD releases, focus on just a small set of characters, but this one just had tons of characters in it. So there was kind of the idea that if this was going to, if it took off, it could potentially be a new Justice League Unlimited, in the sense that there were so many characters to draw from. The fan base wasn't quite there as it was for Justice League Unlimited, but the designs were still unique, were still really awesome looking, and it was great that we had a shot to do this version of the DC Universe in action figure form. So while there were lots of characters to choose from, and I personally would have loved to have done kind of a Captain Marvel Shazam thing since I'm such a big fan of him, the idea was to really focus on Batman and Superman. Now, DC Direct had already done a Public Enemies line in the past. Their line focused on the comic book, the original source material for the animated series, and they had done Shazam and Captain Atom already, in addition to Superman and Batman. So our idea and kind of the direction we were going with was to find ways to focus on some other characters. Obviously, we were going to do Batman and Superman. You kind of always have to do them, but since we were going to be doing the DVD version versus the original comic book, it was a way to keep putting out characters in Public Enemy style that could basically work with the DC Direct line, they could work with the DC Universe Classics line, or work on their own. It was a very unique wave to work on, and it presented a lot of unique challenges. And I'm really excited the way we kind of stepped up and did this by partnering with Warner and DC to find a way to make this ideally appease everyone. So for starters, we had new branding with the Superman Batman Public Enemies design for the packaging. And because this was a Target customized line, we were doing more than just 6-inch. We were also going to do 3 and 3/4 inch figures in both 3-packs, and we wound up doing a 6-pack because, as I've explained in some of the planogram videos, you can see linked here, when you're doing a program, you have to think from the top all the way to the bottom. Basically meaning you have to have pegged items, mid-shelf items, and bottom shelf items. The arrangement of a planogram can often dictate toy design, and this is a perfect example. The reason there was a 6-pack is because we needed an item for the bottom shelf. The reason that there are 3-packs is because we needed an item for the mid-shelf. And the reason there are single 6-inch figures is because we needed items to hang on pegs above this. So this was essentially kind of a 1 foot or half a foot strip of customized product for Target that could hang next to DCU Classics proper to give them something unique and something that other retailers didn't have to draw customers into Target. And that all goes with how customization works for the retail industry. So the 6-inch line, which was the core of it, which is what I'm going to go into, the 3 3/4 was, you kind of saw a glimpse of that, but all of it had that new branding. So you did have some of the DCU Classics, kind of that orange burst behind them to kind of create a connection, but we also had very unique elements like the logo. As I noted, Superman and Batman were going to be the core of this series, and for both of these guys, we did 2 different versions. But we also had the chance to do some other unique characters, and some who hadn't been in DCU Classics before. In fact, some that actually, this was their only sort of 6-inch DCU Classics figure that we would have ever got to. I'll kind of go figure by figure and talk about that, but it's interesting how it sort of wound up in the end once the line was over. So starting with Bats and Soups, as I said, both of them had 2 different decos, essentially to do 2 different SKUs in order to, pad out the line to make more SKUs available. But honestly, Batman and Superman always sell, and that's why every toy company that does, DC Comics always has lots of Batman and Superman, because they're extremely popular among kids, collectors, moms, gift givers, the whole shebang. And Batman has a lot of different decos that are, if you will, I'm doing air quotes here, acceptable to the fan base. You could even do rainbow-colored Batmans like they did in the 40s. In fact, I think DC Direct did that set. But that crazy deco aside, there are lots of traditional decos. So Batman got his blue deco and his black and gray deco, which, again, are both very, accepted decos of the Dark Knight. And you can see here him compared to the DC Universe Classics and DC Superheroes Batman, which predated Classics. And, the scale is more or less the same. He's a little bit more beefed up because of the art that he was based on, the source art from the comic book. But otherwise, it's, a 6-inch scale figure. Same goes with Superman. So, again, we were going to go with a more beefed up body. In fact, I think he shared the same body as Batman. As far as, the main buck, the tool, if you will. And he had a more animated looking head, but still, again, trying not to go too animated, so it also worked for DCU Classics. And he had his regular traditional red and blue, and then he had a more kind of metallic blue that really, again, kind of aimed at kids, because any toy line sold at retail has to sell 80% to kids. Even if it's something, like Public Enemies or Black Series or Marvel Legends or DCU Classics, anything that's in the toy aisle has got to appeal to kids first and foremost. Collectors are just the gravy. So even if it's, aimed at collectors. So here he is, again, compared to previous Mattel and even DC Direct Supermen, noting that, he stands kind of shoulder to shoulder with them. And no S shield on the cape. That was always something that was, I wouldn't call it an issue, but it was always addressed Superman to Superman, whether he was going to have an S shield. But, this was being true to the source material. So next we get to our first non-Batman and Superman character, which was Black Lightning, who I think is probably a little bit more well-known today, thanks to the live-action TV show. But back then he was not as well-known, but had a very cool, unique outfit that harkened back to kind of his vintage outfit in the 70s in the comic books, and again on that buffed up body. If I remember correct, they all used that we sort of tooled up one buffed up body. We did do Black Lightning in DCU Classics proper. In fact, other than Superman, Batman, he is the only character from Public Enemies that had that. So as an example of one that didn't, here we have Silver Banshee. So this is the only Silver Banshee figure we ever did in 6-inch. And I remember talking to Bill Beneke, the designer. We were being very, very conscious, while to make her look like the animated version, to sort of tip her a little bit more in the direction of the comic book style of DCU Classics when we were talking to the Horseman about how to sculpt her, because we weren't sure if we were going to be able to get to another version of her in true comic book style. So same goes with Major Force. And I gotta tell you, Major Force was on more DCU Classics B sheets and as a figure who was sort of on a B sheet but didn't go forward than almost any other character. I don't know what it was, but he just like constantly was on B sheets to do, and then just constantly seemed to get dropped for another figure over the years. He must have been on like 5 or 6 over the course of the years. But here he is in his slightly animated style, but again, giving him a little bit more of a comic book look so he would fit in, being very conscious of that. Same with Icicle here. So this was the only Icicle figure. He was not a character that we that was on other B sheets like Major Force, but it's great that he got a Superman versus Batman Public Enemies figure, because he had a very cool, unique look in the animated series with that goatee. And you can always tell it's a Bill Beneke figure when it's got, like clear fingertips. He always goes the extra mile doing those kind of things, making sure, ice figures are transitioning between ice and flesh. Gotta love Bill for that. And the Build-A-Figure. So there was a Build-A-Figure in the series, just like DCU Classics, which was Brimstone. Now, Brimstone's a character that, in the comic books and even in the animated series or show, DVD, has been, as big as a house. And obviously, we weren't in a position to make him that big. I know we did an Anti-Monitor figure at Comic-Con, and even Marvel Legends has their giant Sentinel coming out. But he stood shoulder to shoulder with most other Build-A-Figures. Not quite as big as Chemo, who I think was the biggest one. And part of this was because he was based on the Kilowog buck. So that buck wound up paying off a lot. We used Kilowog's body, his tool, for quite a few Build-A-Figures, including Brimstone. So, and it was cool that we got to do a Brimstone figure, because, again, the only one we did. Now, my big mistake that I made was I split this wave up into 2 assortments, with different Batman and Superman in each, and then different secondary characters. This was one of my biggest mistakes I think I ever made managing DCU at Mattel, because, the idea of a horse divided itself cannot stand, because a horse would fall over, I guess. I don't know if that's right. But yeah, I regret doing that. I wish that I should have just put everything into one case pack. Trying to stretch it over 2 case packs really kind of threw a gear in the system and kind of messed up some of the distribution, and I really regret that I did that. But at the end of the day, it meant more figures. More action figures in 6-inch, and, characters that could fit in with DCU Classics. They could be their own thing, their animated look. They could work with the DC Direct figures. It was a really great kind of line that spanned multiple lines to fit with, to be compatible with. And that was kind of the whole idea. We were very conscious of that. So while not a DCU Classics figure proper on the orange packaging, little things like having the orange burst behind the figure in the Public Enemies branding, and really being conscious of characters like Major Force and Icicle and Silver Banshee, especially knowing that we might not get to a proper DCU Classics version, we were very conscious to try to make them blend. All right, next time we got a very special one I think everyone's been waiting for. So come back next time, get some questions answered.